Good morning, CPAC. This is my 6th CPAC, which is amazing. My first CPAC was in 2013. At the time, Turning Point USA was about 5 or 6 people strong. But for those that don't know, Turning Point USA, we're a nationwide grassroots student activist movement, now present on 1,400 high school and college campuses across the country. When we're not growing Turning Point USA every single day, I'm traveling the country, speaking on college campuses with the great Candace Owens sometimes. I know she's here somewhere. Where's Candace? She's done more to move the black community to conservative values in the last year than I think anyone does in the last 30 years. So God bless you, Candace, for what you've done. Totally amazing. And what we find is that students are not opposed to our ideas inherently, is that they're not exposed to them at all in the first place. It's that the left has done everything they possibly can to make sure our generation has never heard why America is the greatest country ever to exist, or why free markets are the most moral, proven, and effective economic system ever discovered, or why the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written, or why abortion after birth is immoral and should be rejected in modern and decent society. They never heard these ideas. And one of the things Donald Trump has done is he has not changed the left, he has revealed them. This is who they have always been. They have always hated this country. They have always had contempt for our history. And what I find is that we as conservatives, we say far too often, well, we want the same thing as liberals. We just have a different way of getting there. Who's heard this before? I don't want to live in the country that the socialist left wants to create. We are not going in the same direction as the Democrat Party. I don't want to live in the country where it's okay to execute a newborn child. That's not the country I want to live in. We do not have different ways of getting to the same place. We have 2 different places that we want to get to. And I'm so sick and tired of saying we should give the benefit of the doubt to liberals and say, well, they mean well. They mean well. If you want to fundamentally transform and destroy this country from within, you do not mean well. You do not have good intentions whatsoever. If you want to suppress conservatives from coming on college campuses, you do not mean well. If you want to deplatform conservatives from social media, you do not mean well. If you want to continue to give $500 million a year to Planned Parenthood, you do not mean well. If you want to stand against Israel, you do not mean well. If you want to keep on giving money to the Palestinian Authority, you do not mean well. If you want to give hundreds of millions of dollars to the mullahs in Iran, you do not mean well. If you would rather listen to Michael Cohen spew lies than applaud the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, you do not mean well. I'm so sick and tired of saying that the Democrat Party and liberals mean well. They do not mean well. If there's one thing we take away from what this president has taught us, is that when we as a movement fight, we win. And it seems as if for the last 30 years we've been afraid to fight. And the one fight that brought us together, because we took note from the president, was the attempted public character assassination of now Justice Brett Kavanaugh. When the left did everything they possibly could to destroy a decent man and his family based on 30-year-old lies, and we were somehow supposed to dismiss this amazing judicial record because of something that we had not heard of before now came into public light. But we must understand as we go into the 2020 cycle, the left knows that their attacks from the middle are not working. They are now going to try to attack Donald Trump from within our own movement. They're going to try to say he did not fulfill his promises. they're going to try to say he is not doing what he said he is going to do. If you want to get love from the left, be a conservative that attacks Donald Trump. If you want to get on the mainstream networks, be a conservative that writes poorly about this president. You want to get published in all the best newspapers, be a conservative that attacks the most conservative president in our generation. Because, and you must understand, those of us that decide to stand and defend this president, it can be very tough. You will get article after article written about you. But if you want to be loved, you want to get invited to the cocktail parties, you want to get all the right compliments on Twitter, then sure, attack the president. But we as a conservative movement should never, ever try to appease the left just to be loved. Ever. Ever. We must do what is right, do what is correct, and stand for truth. This is the most conservative president since Ronald Reagan, if not in American history. And he has done everything he said he is going to do. For years, I came to CPAC and I heard, if only we had someone that stood up against Iran, if only we could move the embassy, if only we could cut corporate taxes, if only we could have more conservatives on the judicial bench, if only we could deregulate the economy, if only we could rebuild our military, if only we had someone that took immigration seriously, if only we had someone that stood for the flag, if only we had someone that finally called out the relationship between big business and big government and big tech. Folks, we have that president, and he's fighting for us every single day. I get asked quite often, Charlie, what do you see coming from the next generation? And traveling the country and going to these college campuses, I could tell you, there's a lot to be concerned about. The socialist movement is growing, but there's also a lot to be optimistic about. And the conservative movement that I see growing right now is going to be one that understands the left. Because if you're a campus conservative out there, whether you're part of Turning Point USA or all the other amazing organizations out there, and you stay a conservative for 4 years, you understand exactly who the left is. And so I see a conservative movement that will stand for the dignity of all people, unborn, preborn, newly born, all people. That's the conservative movement that I see. I see a conservative movement that is thankful to live in America, not angry to live in America. I see a conservative movement that stands with Israel. I see a conservative movement that fights the left, not the way that they fight us, where they punch us in the face like they did at UC Berkeley. Hayden Williams, total hero, gets punched in the face because he was tabling for Turning Point USA with the Leadership Institute, but that fights the left in cultural institutions, that understands, as the great Andrew Breitbart said, that politics flows downstream from culture. And if you gave me an option and said, would you rather have more control in politics or culture, which would you choose? And I would choose culture in an instant. Because politics is short-term, culture is long-term. And the left has done so much corrosion in our society in the cultural realm, where students are being taught that there's no such thing as objective truth, that you are your own truth, that there's no such thing as right and wrong. You can create your own right and wrong. And this stems from the universities. And for years, I tried to warn the conservative base that there was going to be a socialist under the age of 35 that's going to come to Congress and is going to try to make these ideas mainstream. And some people didn't, they kind of laughed at me. Well, they're here, and there's more than one of them. Because what happens in Congress, what happens on campus, will soon come to Congress. College campuses are a harbinger of things to come. College campuses can tell you, they're the leading indicator of exactly the ideology and the viewpoints that will soon be held mainstream in media, pop culture, and in Congress. And so what we do, the fight that I've decided to engage in, is one that will either make or break Western civilization. Because Because our generation, the next generation, Generation Z, if we have a generation that has contempt for America, it doesn't matter if they want high or low taxes. If we have a generation that hates this country, that believes that we're racist, misogynistic, and homophobic, it doesn't matter. All the rest is irrelevant. And if you think you're oppressed because you live in America, you're wrong. You have to be taught that you're oppressed if you think you're oppressed because you live in America. And so, folks, in closing, I'll say this. We have one of the greatest blessings ever to be living in this country at this time. There's a culture war brewing right now. And it's a culture war different. It's a different one from the 80s and 90s. It's one fundamental question. What is America? Is America a place for victims or for victors? Is America a place where you can achieve your dreams or dwell in mediocrity? Is America a socialist place, or is America a place that embraces freedom and is a refuge for those that have fled totalitarian Marxist dictatorships? That will be the question of the 2020 election. It will be the most important culture war in American history, and we will win. Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.